Democrats are shifting the narrative. They're going from hush money trial now to election interference trial. Isn't that interesting? It's because the first stopped mattering to people a long time ago because it involves liars, perjurers, and a corrupt prosecutor who are trying to go after Biden's political opponents through people like Matthew Colangelo and others. But the shift is now happening in the court of public opinion as well. This is Lanny Davis. You know him. He's a major TDS attorney, someone who has been involved in Democrat politics for a long time, even advising Michael Cohen in some instances. And here is what he said. It's no longer about hush money. And if people are making fun of this case, you got to correct the record with them. Okay. This is what the lefties are being told and being taught from their MSNBC overlords. Get in their faces and tell them that this is truthfully about election interference.
Well, let me quote Donald Trump's Justice Department's prosecutors in public when they made the charge that Donald Trump, and they wrote this, directed Michael Cohen to pay this money to Ms. Daniels. They said this case is about the impairment of democracy by allowing wealthy people such as Mr. Trump to buy silence a few days before the election to prevent the American people from gaining information they need.
See?
They describe this case as about democracy. That's the Federal District of New York, Southern District of New York prosecutors in a public document.
Well, why did they prosecute Trump then, Lanny? They could have charged him. They didn't. How come? Why didn't you ask Jeffrey Berman about that? How come Joe Biden's DOJ didn't reinstitute this and charge him? Very curious, Lanny, because it's not about that at all.
Hiding in plain sight. So every time someone describes this in a disparaging way as about sex or something else, quote Donald Trump's prosecutors describing this case as seriously about the undermining of democracy.
Okay, so he's like, please talk about it in a way that will matter more than intercourse with some Stormy, okay? And Michael Cohen, like the worst people in the world. Make it mean something. People don't think this means anything. People think this is meaningless. So let's see what some other attorneys, judges, and other commentators have to say about this. You know, Jonathan Turley does great work on X and everywhere else. Here is what he said about this when they brought him on, talking about some options that Trump might have to emerge victoriously in this case.
Well, they're not very surprising. These are fairly standard and predictable moves. The first one being that you have to destroy Michael Cohen's credibility, but there's not much there to destroy. I mean, this is the ultimate bottom feeder witness, where the question is whether the jury is going to recoil by the prosecutors putting him on the stand. He was just denounced by a judge for being a serial perjurer. And so it doesn't really help to say, well, that's so last week. I'm testifying in another case. He has this long litany of false statements, conflicts. You know, he pleaded guilty under oath and then later said that he wasn't telling the truth. To the astonishment of many of us, he was never prosecuted for that perjury.
Of course not.
By the Justice Department. And now he's appearing as a witness for a prosecution team. So
it's wild. And they just turned around and they just prosecuted Weisselberg.
This is just a very strange universe that we have entered in this case.
Bizarro land.
The second issue involves a fairly standard motion that occurs when you believe that the jury may not agree that the big ticket item of a charge, the felonies, is proven. And you want the court to give an instruction saying you can always convict on lesser included offenses, in this case a misdemeanor. Now, sometimes the defense doesn't want to do that. Sometimes they just want to leave the jury with the cliff option, thinking that they don't want to go over the cliff, so they'll go ahead and acquit. But many times this works in favor of the defense. For Trump, there could be personal resistance to even suggesting a possible misdemeanor conviction. But politically and legally, it would be a very significant advantage for him.
A couple of things. Lanny Davis, the attorney for Michael Cohen, I don't know how he's paying him, says there's more than just Michael Cohen to testify against Trump. Do you know of anything about this?
Well, you know, I've been critical of this case since it was filed. This is the weaponization of the criminal justice system.
That's right,
This
Jonathan
is a bizarre
Turley.
case. And in fact, that second strategy makes sense because this was always a misdemeanor under state law, but it's the statute of limitations had run. So what they did here is they bootstrapped a federal crime and they're going to prosecute it essentially in state court. And now this is a crime the Department of Justice rejected. They didn't believe that there could be a basis for charging under the federal election laws, at least not a credible one.
Yeah, but the way they're getting around that is Mershon is saying it's not that they had to prosecute it or that there needs to be evidence that he committed or is guilty of the crime. It's just that he had intent to commit the crime. And you go, what? So you have to have intent to commit a crime in the first place. But they're saying you have intent to commit the crime and you did the action to commit the crime. And as part of the elements, one of those elements is that you intended to commit another crime. Well, what's the evidence of that other crime? Well, it's pretty broad. fraud, kind of whatever we say it is. Okay, so that's Mershon. And he gave us 4 different theories, right? And they were federal election crimes. So they said Trump violated federal election crimes, even though the SDNY looked at it and they said he didn't, or at least they didn't prosecute him for it. The other one was a tax crime locally in New York, that there was a violation for grossing up Michael Cohen's pay. And then there was one other one, 3 essential philosophies that we've talked about in our review. So this is Jonathan Turley wrapping up.
So you have this really odd effort in order to sort of take a federal offense, rejuvenate a misdemeanor, and then convict him for a felony. And it's just, in my view, raw political manipulation of the criminal justice system.
Yeah, he's right. And the third element, the third opportunity to say that there was a felony that he could have committed. So again, it's Trump falsified a business record with the intent to conceal the commission of another crime. So intent to commit or to commit another crime. And they were also saying that Trump was violating the law, which is falsifying evidence, essentially, for a candidate who's running for office, right? False information, false campaigning on behalf of a candidate. So that's Jonathan Turley. I think good analysis. And he's right. It's bizarre. The whole situation is what's going on in New York. It's like, okay. And this is Judge Andrew Napolitano also weighing in. What's coming up in New York?
Cameras in the courtroom. Has this been a positive for
overall,
the way trials play out?
That is a great question. Not in this case, where Judge Ito, who was running for election, pandered to the cameras almost
talking about
OJ.
This starts Monday. This hush money trial is going to begin. If there are cameras allowed in the courtroom, if the judge rules that, is that good for Donald Trump to have those cameras there?
Well,
I don't think he can.
The former president is a master at taking misfortune and turning it into his political benefit. So if he is berated by the judge, for example, seeing that on camera, Donald Trump will be able to take that clip and use it in a commercial.
That's why they don't want to put the cameras in
there. Seeking the presidency. But overall, I can't say if it'll be good or bad for him. In one respect, he's got to behave himself in a procedure that is essentially boring. This is not a trial like you see on television or in the movies. 90% of it is boring, boring, boring. He has to sit there. He has to be there 100% of the time, 4 days a week. They're going to take Wednesdays off. That day may float, but they're going to sit for 4 days a week.
All right, so he is going to be bogged down there. Good thing he has nothing else important going on, like an election. Here is Gregg Jarrett, our final commentator on this conversation, talking about the trial.
Oblivious, and I think they're, delusional. These indictments all have one common denominator, Brian. They're politically driven. And Americans see this for what it is, an abuse of our legal system meant to interfere in the presidential election.
I hope so.
But, polls show it's backfiring, only solidifying Trump's support. And voters see him really as a villain, not as a villain, rather, but as a victim of unscrupulous political enemies who are weaponizing the law. So, we'll have to wait and see how it turns out.
All right, we'll be here, of course, covering this when it drops on Monday. And our plan is we're going to go through the excerpts. I think many people will probably be there, and there are observation rooms with cameras and screens where they can watch what's happening inside the courtrooms. And so we'll be here in trial mode, and I hope you join us as we do. Thanks for being here, my friends. It's a beautiful Friday. Thanks for subscribing and liking this video wherever it is you're watching it. We've got a great members-only community. We do live streams in the mornings, every weekday, and on Saturdays. We'd love to have you come and join us, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We do after parties there, an amazing community, and we get into some other things that we can't squeeze into here on the show. So come on, join us, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We'll see you there and back here on the next one.